Welcome back to a new video. Today I will show you how to create this amazing looking hair that shimmers in different colors. Of course, you can also use any other alcohol-based markers or adapt this with every art supplies you like. There are no limits to your creativity. I picked up to 3 colors that go well together. In this case, it's a purple, a blue and a pinkish tone. You can also try out other colors like yellow, green and blue, or play with deeper or brighter shades, or even with more additional colors. I start with the purple shade, but you can also start with the blue one. Just keep the brightest tone for the end. Try to avoid creating small color areas. You also don't need to fill the whole area with color. A lot of it will be painted over later, so you can leave some empty spaces like it's shown. It's not necessary to work it out pretty or evenly now. In this step you don't need to rush. Take your time to add the different colors, because other than doing, for example, skin coloring, where it's sometimes really important to work fast so the colors are wet and blend smoothly into each other, this technique is not important for this hair coloration. So better work a little bit slower but thoughtful than to rush and to stress yourself out. And of course, keep the natural hair flow in your mind while adding the colors. The next step is to add now the blue shade, but with this color I blend right into the purple tone. So in this way it creates a middle tone between both colors, and of course a pretty gradation in this way. I add most of the blue color on the edges and tips of the hair. Of course you can add purple and blue as much as you like. The more layers of color you add, the deeper it gets. I personally love the middle tone that is created by blending these two colors into each other. With a pinkish tone you can now add some details and highlights between the blue and purple areas, especially where you left some blank spaces. But it's not necessary to fill them all. It's just meant as a little bright splash of a bright color shade. Somehow, with these colors, she looks a little bit like cotton candy. But this will change now, because I'm now adding the darker color shades to give this hair some kind of structure. For this, I normally use these two colors together, but sometimes I also use this tone together with the other two colors I just showed you. This color is a little pale, dark, reddish blue tone, and these three work great together. If you don't have dark colors like these, you can also take deep, cool grayish tones, and depending on what kind of colors you have used already for the hair, for example, if you added more green tones instead of blue like I did, I would recommend to take the neutral gray tones, or for more yellowish shades, I would recommend you those warm gray tones. Of course, both combined with black, so you have a deeper shade as a little contrast. This is just a little tip in case you want to work with other colors, or if you don't have similar colors like I use. And I have also a little side tutorial for the hair structure, because it's important to draw this kind of hair smooth and loosely, So it's possible that you might have to practice your lines first to create these dynamic strokes. It's really important to have this loose wrist movement. So it's quite loose and slightly circular. Another practice is to draw the lines in an up and down movement. So you practice to have some dynamic parts without straight, same looking lines. This kind of adding random and unevenly strokes will make it look more natural. You should try to combine both so the hair will look more vivid. If you feel insecure about finding the right place to add the highlights, you can mark them lightly with a colored pencil, but for the highlights, keep in mind, less is more. Drawing those loosely strokes is kind of similar to drawing lashes. Drawing them out of a loose movement will make single hair look more natural. I'm always working on different parts without finishing any part at first. Okay, that sounds strange. And I continue to work it out step by step. If I have to explain this step, it's a little bit like a puzzle that comes together with all its pieces at the end. Another thing, always keep the natural hair flow in mind. It's really important, so it won't look weird. While working step by step, I have spaced to left some longer gaps that connects the highlights in the end, which looks more elegant and natural in my opinion. In case you have created too many gaps, it's no problem at all. You can still work it out later on. So here's a little comparison of how not to draw highlights. In this example, there are way too much highlights. They are not dynamic, way too stiff and too regular. In some kind of art styles, these straight highlights look great, but even in those art styles, those highlights are placed in a very small number. Like just as a little detail of highlights, you know? So no matter what kind of style, or if it's realistic or not, or if it keeps some kind of art rule, I personally think there's always only one rule. It's important to keep the harmony, to keep the balance. So the weirdest, unrealistic proportion can look good if it's overall balanced, especially in its details. So with the technique I've shown you, I start to draw the hair with the reddish blue tone, and it's the best not to try to work perfectly right now. It will all come together in the end, and you can still add more colors or fill spaces later on. For now, it's just important to build the basic hair structure, so don't worry if there are bold gaps or if not everything looks evenly. We're gonna work this out little by little. By the way, I bet you have already noticed that everything in this video is shown in real time. So yes, I am really this slow when I'm coloring my works. I thought it would be great for this tutorial to show you all the steps in real time, so it's maybe easier to get to know how I'm working and to get a better understanding of my technique. There's really not often the chance to see an art piece created in full motion. That's why I did this tutorial in this way, even if it gets way more longer than any other tutorial I did. From time to time, there are just some jump cuts in case if some parts are already explained or just self-explaining. but you might have already noticed this. As you can see, I have not colored the hair ends because I want to let the colors fade out in the end with a small gradation, but I will show you this step later on. I'm now going in with a more darker color, but not black. Her actual hair color is this reddish blue tone. The colorful first layer are the highlights, and the darkest shade I'm currently using is to give this hair more structure and shades that somehow supports the colorful parts to shine through. I'm using the reddish blue tone to blend the edges of the darker color, so in this way it has a soft gradation. Sometimes I'm adding a little bit more, and sometimes I just left some edges sharp. On her bangs, I add just a little bit of color. I'm working quite similar like before, so leaving spaces, working step by step until it all comes together. And of course, I'm still blending the edges from time to time. But while doing this, be careful not to paint over all those colorful highlights. It's a little more advanced tutorial, but if you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments and I will try my best to answer all your questions. If you are new to coloring hair or if you try it for the first time, you really might need to practice this. But keep in mind, no tutorial ever will give you the power to master something by the first try. So unfortunately, you will have to practice to become a master, but I truly believe that you can do it. Oh, and of course, you can always go in with the colors we have already used as much as you like and add more details by blending or to raise the contrast. Do whatever you prefer. I think blending with brighter tones looks always great, and this is what I like when using markers. You can even add details to the darkest color by blending. It's important to work out edges to keep it balanced and dynamic at the same time. Hair is wild, and depending on your art style, the way you draw hair might be different. I personally like to give the hair a more semi-realistic touch, so I'm following the hair flow and I try to work out the edges like this. With a brush pen, it's pretty easy to create such edges. You only might need to practice the right movement. So in these final steps, I'm just adding more details by blending with the blue tone right into the dark ones. You can do the same with purple or with the brighter pinkish tone as well. Just be careful when you blend into deep dark colors like black, for example. it would be a little bit difficult to blend. So now I'm just repeating, blending and adding darker shades, so there's not much to explain about this, because you're just gonna have to repeat all the steps until you're done. Make sure that all your markers are juicy enough, otherwise you might need to refill them with various ink. So your markers really need to contain enough ink, especially for the blending parts. Because you don't put only one layer of color over it, you color multiple times and a dry marker won't give it the same effect. This is now an optional step. I'm using black for little contrast tweaks. It's just a little detail, but I think it makes the hair look even more shiny. This kind of layering different colors and blending is what makes it all look complex, because it's hard to tell where it starts, but once you have understand the way of blending and layering, it gets easier to use this technique. I'm adding some single hairs in different shades to give it all a more natural and fluffy look. But keep in mind, less is more. Otherwise, she will look like just falling out of bed or having a bad hair day. And now it's done. Now I'm showing you an optional step. You don't have to do this. It's just for the sake of giving you options and tips, because I personally use often white ink in my coloration, and I also know that a lot of you guys use it too. So I'm mostly using this white ink from Dr. P.H. Martens for my highlights. So in case you like to add highlights in the hair, I don't think it's necessary to add any highlights to this, but just in case, and maybe if you want to add single white hairs that are pretty thin, you can fill a water brush container with this ink and water and use it carefully with just a little amount of ink. As an alternative, you can also use a pretty thin brush. For example, I got this one from a store that sells nail art products, but you can find it also on Amazon, for example. As a final step, I erase some parts of the outlines that I have made with a Polychromo. So especially on the edges and hair ends, it looks just great to have no outlines at all. So it looks more soft and like it's fading to the background, and it looks even more shiny. And that's definitely it for this tutorial. I hope you liked this tutorial. I would love to see your results, so make sure to tag me if you tried this out, or use the hashtag HelloRambo on Instagram, so I can see what you have created. If you have any questions left, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. And of course I have to make some self-advertisement, so please check out my Patreon page and consider supporting me for more art, extra content, special perks. By supporting me on Patreon, you make it possible for me to create tutorials like this one, because especially those tutorials are pretty much time consuming. So if you like to support my art, I would really appreciate it. Every bit counts and makes it possible for me to make more helpful content for you here on YouTube. In the next week, I'm going to show you a little short skin tutorial from this artwork, from this tutorial. So I will see you soon. Thanks so much for watching, and like always, stay creative. Bye bye!